Queenpin, Story of Ice. The Price of Power Episode 7. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over North Park. The city buzzed with the tense energy. Whispers of Ice's recent victory against Malik had reached every corner, but with victory came new threats. As Jade Ice Daniels stood on the rooftop of her warehouse, the city below felt like a chessboard. Each move she made had to be precise, calculated. One mistake could topple everything. Unfinished business. Inside the warehouse, Dre paced like a caged lion. His arm was bandaged from the ambush at the docks, but his anger burned hotter than the pain. Malik's still out there, he growled. You know he won't stop until one of us is dead. Ice, seated at the head of the table, sipped her coffee, her ice blue eyes fixed on the map before her. Let him come. He's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Eli leaned against the wall, his expression thoughtful. He's not the only problem. Malik's crew might be scattered, but they're not gone. They're regrouping, and we've got new players sniffing around. Ice's gaze snapped to Eli. New players? Southside Hustlers, Eli said. Word is they're looking to expand. With Malik weakened, they're eyeing his old turf and ours. Dre slammed his fist on the table. Let me handle it. We send a message, loud and clear. Ice shook her head. We don't move until we know more. Ghost? From the shadows, Ghost stepped forward, his expression unreadable. I'll keep eyes on them. But Dre's right, if they're planning something, we need to shut it down before it starts. Ice nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities. Do it, but quietly. We can't afford to show weakness. A new alliance. Later that night, Ice met with Rico, the elder statesman of North Park's underworld. He had been one of the first to pledge loyalty after her takeover, but loyalty in this game was always conditional. The meeting took place at a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where deals were made and trust was a fleeting commodity. Rico was nursing a glass of whiskey when Ice slid into the booth across from him. You've been busy, he said, his gravelly voice tinged with amusement. Taking down Malik, locking down the docks. Impressive. Ice didn't smile. Impressive isn't enough. I need stability. Word is, you've got connections with the Southside Hustlers. Rico raised an eyebrow. And what makes you think I'd share those connections? Because if the Hustlers move on my turf, it'll start a war, Ice replied. And wars are bad for business, for all of us. Rico leaned back, studying her. You're smart, Ice. Smarter than most. But the Hustlers are unlike Malik. They don't play by the same rules. Then we change the rules, Ice said, her voice cold. I don't want a war, but if they force my hand, I'll end it. Rico smirked, raising his glass. You've got guts, I'll give you that. I'll make some calls, but you'd better be ready for whatever comes next. Betrayal in the ranks. As Ice worked to secure her position, cracks began to appear within her crew. Dre, frustrated by what he perceived as hesitation, began questioning her decisions more openly. We should have taken out Malik already, Dre said during a meeting. Every day we wait, we're giving him time to regroup. And every day we wait, we're gathering intel, Ice shot back. I won't risk my crew on a half-baked plan. Dre leaned forward, his voice low but charged. You're playing it too safe, Ice. That's not the leader we followed. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Eli, sensing the shift, stepped in. We all want the same thing, to stay on top, but we do it smart. No one's questioning Ice's leadership. Dre's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Ice met his gaze, her expression unyielding. If you've got a problem, Dre, say it. Otherwise, do your job. The Hustlers strike. The Southside Hustlers made their move sooner than expected. Late one night, one of ICE's stash houses was hit, a clean, efficient operation that left no witnesses and no trace of the attackers. The message was clear: the Hustlers were in play. Ice, Eli, and Ghost surveyed the aftermath. The warehouse was gutted, the product gone. This wasn't just a hit, Ghost said, his voice quiet but deadly. They wanted to show us they're not afraid. Ice clenched her fists, her mind racing. Then we remind them why they should be. The trap. Ice devised a plan to draw the Hustlers out. Using one of her remaining stash houses as bait, she leaked false intel about a shipment. It was risky, but if it worked, it would give her the upper hand. The night of the operation, Ice, Eli, Dre, and Ghost took their positions. Ghost watched from a nearby rooftop, his rifle ready, while Ice and Eli waited inside the warehouse. Think they'll take the bait? Eli asked, his voice low. They will, Ice replied. They're too bold not to. When the Hustlers arrived, they moved with the same precision as before, but this time, they walked into an ambush. Ghost's first shot took out their leader, throwing the crew into chaos. Dre and his team moved in, cutting off their escape. Aftermath. By the end of the night, the Hustlers were broken, their threat neutralized, but the victory came at a cost. Dre had been injured in the fight, and the tension between him and Ice had reached a breaking point. As the crew regrouped, Dre confronted Ice. You got lucky tonight. But luck runs out, Ice's expression hardened. This wasn't luck, it was strategy. Maybe you should learn the difference. Dre shook his head, his frustration boiling over. You've changed, Ice, and not for the better. He stormed out, leaving Ice and Eli alone. Eli watched her, his expression unreadable. You okay? She didn't answer immediately. Dre's loyal, but he doesn't see the bigger picture. That's what makes him dangerous, Eli nodded. You're not wrong, but he's also right about one thing. This game, it's changing. As Ice sat alone in her loft that night, her phone buzzed with a message. The sender was unknown, but the words sent a chill down her spine. You've won the battle, but the war is far from over. Sleep with one eye open, Queenpin. Ice stared at the screen, her mind already racing. The challenges were growing, and the stakes had never been higher. But Jade Ice Daniels didn't get this far by backing down. Blood in the Water Episode 8. North Park's power vacuum was filling quickly. Ice's empire was growing, her influence spreading beyond the blocks she'd fought to control. But with every victory came new challenges, and as the dust settled from her clash with the Southside Hustlers, whispers of a new player began to ripple through the streets. The return of Red. C was in her loft, poring over maps of her territory, marking expansions and consolidating power. Eli sat across from her, his laptop open as he analyzed the latest intel on rival crews. Dre was noticeably absent. His frustration with Ice had led him to take some personal time, though Ice wasn't entirely sure she trusted his motives. The comm was interrupted by Ghost's voice crackling through the comms. Ice, we've got a visitor. Ice straightened, her ice blue eyes narrowing. Who? Red Carter, Ghost replied. And she's not alone. Ice exchanged a glance with Eli, who immediately closed his laptop and stood. What's she doing here? Eli asked, grabbing his gun. We're about to find out, Ice said, her tone cold as steel. Meeting the Red Carter walked into Ice's loft like she owned the place. Her fiery red hair was tied back, and her signature trench coat billowed as she moved. Behind her were two armed men, their expressions unreadable but their hands hovering near their weapons. "Nice place, Queenpin," Red said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "I see business is booming." Ice didn't flinch. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "Cut the theatrics, Red. Why are you here?" Red smirked, taking a seat at the table without waiting for an invitation. "Straight to the point." "I like that." She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "I hear you've been cleaning house." Malik, the Southside Hustlers. "Impressive work, get to the point," Ice snapped. Red's smirk widened. "The point is, your empire's growing, and when empires grow, they attract attention, mine specifically." Ice crossed her arms. "I don't need your help." "Maybe not," Red admitted, "but you need what I know. Malik's not your biggest problem anymore. There's a new crew in town, and they're not here to play games." The threat. Red slid a folder across the table. Ice hesitated before picking it up, her sharp eyes scanning the contents. Photos, names, locations, all linked to a crew called the Black Vipers. They were ruthless, well-funded, and highly organized. Their leader, a man named Kane, had a reputation for dismantling operations like Ice's with surgical precision. "Kane's already made moves," Red explained. "He's taken over 3 territories on the south side, and he's got his sights set on North Park." Ice's jaw tightened. "Why are you telling me this? What's in it for you?" Red's smirk returned. "Let's just say I've got a score to settle with Kane. You take him out, and it makes my life easier." Ice's gaze remained cold. "And if I don't, then Kane keeps coming," Red said, her tone dropping. "And trust me, Ice, he's not like Malik. He won't stop until you're nothing but a memory." A fragile alliance. After Red left, Ice sat in silence, her mind racing. Eli broke the tension. "You trust her?" "No," Ice replied immediately. "But that doesn't mean she's wrong." Ghost entered the room, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "We can handle Kane. Red's just stirring the pot." "Maybe," Ice said, her voice thoughtful. "But if Kane's as dangerous as she says, we need to be ready." Eli leaned against the table, his expression serious. "So what's the plan?" "We gather intel," Ice said. "Ghost, I want eyes on Kane's crew." "Eli, dig into their operations, find their weak spots." "And Dre," she hesitated, realizing she hadn't seen him in hours. "Where the hell is Dre?" Betrayal in the ranks. As Ghost and Eli got to work, Ice reached out to Dre, but his phone went straight to voicemail. A sense of unease crept over her as she tried to piece together his recent behavior. He'd been distant, argumentative, and now he was missing. Hours later, Ghost returned with intel that confirmed her suspicions. "Dre's been meeting with Kane," he said, his voice low. "Looks like he's been feeding him info on our operations." Ice's blue eyes flashed with anger. "He betrayed us." Eli stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "What do we do?" "We handle it," Ice said, her voice cold. "No one crosses me and gets away with it." The confrontation. Ice and her crew tracked Dre to a warehouse on the edge of North Park. Inside, they found him meeting with Kane and his lieutenants. The scene was tense, the air thick with the weight of betrayal. "Dre," Ice called out, stepping into the room. "You've got some nerve." Dre turned, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Ice, it's not what it looks like." "Save it," Ice snapped. "You've been selling us out. You think Kane's going to protect you?" Kane stepped forward, his presence commanding. Actually, I think Dre made the smart move. Your reign is over, Queenpin. Ice smirked, her confidence unshaken. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. At her signal, Ghost and Eli burst into action. Gunfire erupted, the warehouse descending into chaos. Ice moved with precision, taking out Kane's lieutenants while Ghost provided cover from above. Eli confronted Dre, their fight brutal and personal. You were family, Eli snarled as he pinned Dre against a wall. How could you do this? Dre didn't answer, his face contorted with regret. Before Eli could deliver the final blow, Ice intervened. Leave him, she said coldly. He's not worth it. The fallout. Kane escaped, but his operation took a massive hit. Ice stood in the middle of the wreckage, her crew regrouping around her. What about Dre? Eli asked, his tone bitter. Later that night, Ice received a message from Red. You're welcome, but remember, Kane's just the beginning. The real war is coming. Ice stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. The battle for North Park was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Episode 9 Beneath the Surface. The loft was silent except for the rhythmic tapping of Jade Ice Daniels' manicured nails against the polished table. The weight of recent events hung heavy in the room. Malik was gone, Dre was exiled, and Kane was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Ice wasn't just thinking about her enemies, she was considering her greatest asset: control. The price of freedom. Running an empire wasn't just about outsmarting rivals or protecting turf. Ice had learned that the biggest threats often came from above. The government's eyes were everywhere: tax evasion, racketeering, trafficking. Any misstep could bring her empire crashing down. Ice's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was an encrypted message from a contact she only referred to as the broker. The text was simple: meet me at the usual spot, midnight. Ice leaned back, her ice blue eyes scanning the room. Eli, she called out. He appeared moments later, his usual calm demeanor masking the storm brewing within him. What's good? He asked, his tone casual. Got a meeting tonight. Need you to cover the warehouse, she said, standing and grabbing her jacket. With who? He asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Ice hesitated for a moment before answering. The broker, Eli's brow furrowed. You sure about that? Those kinds of deals don't come cheap, Ice smirked. Nothing about this life comes cheap. The broker. The meeting took place in a dimly lit restaurant on the outskirts of the city, a place where high-end deals were made in the shadows of chandeliers. The broker was already seated at a corner table, a glass of scotch in one hand and a briefcase resting on the floor beside him. The broker was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a face that betrayed no emotion. He operated in the gray areas of law enforcement, working with high-level criminals to ensure that certain operations were overlooked for the right price. Ice, he said as she sat across from him. Always a pleasure. Cut the small talk, Ice replied, her voice cold. What do you have for me? The broker slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents detailing law enforcement surveillance on her operations. Names, dates, locations, everything she needed to stay one step ahead. This will keep you clean for the next 6 months, he said, his tone matter of fact. But after that you'll need to renegotiate. Ice closed the folder, her expression unreadable. And the cost? 200 grand, the broker said. Cash. Ice didn't flinch. Done. Securing the future. Back at the loft, Ice gathered her crew to lay out the next phase of her plan. With the broker's intel, she could streamline her operations, avoid unnecessary risks, and expand into new territory without fear of interference. "We've got 6 months," she said, addressing Ghost, Eli, and the rest of her inner circle. "That's how long this window stays open. We use it to lock down North Park, take Kane out of the picture, and secure our place at the top." Eli leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixed on her. "And after 6 months," Ice smirked, "we renegotiate or we make sure we don't need to." Ghost nodded. "What about Kane? He's not gonna sit back and watch us grow." Ice's expression darkened. "That's why we take the fight to him." "Ghost, I need eyes on his operations." "Eli, start working on a strategy. We're not waiting for him to make the first move." A dangerous revelation. As the crew dispersed, Eli lingered, sensing there was more Ice wasn't saying. Once they were alone, he approached her. "You've been quiet about this deal with the broker. What's the angle?" Ice sighed, running a hand through her blonde and red locks. "The angle is survival, Eli. You think I don't know what happens when the feds start digging? I've seen crews bigger than mine crumble because they didn't have the right protection, and you trust him?" Eli asked, his tone skeptical. "I don't trust anyone," Ice replied, her voice cold. "But I trust leverage, and right now, he's got it." Eli frowned but didn't push further. "Just be careful. Deals like this have a way of coming back to bite you." A new threat. That night, Ghost returned with troubling news. "Kane's been quiet, but not for lack of trying. He's meeting with someone big." Red, Ice's jaw tightened. "She's back?" "Looks like it," Ghost said. "And if she's working with Kane, we're looking at more than just a turf war." Ice nodded, her mind racing. Red was unpredictable, and her involvement meant the stakes were higher than ever. "We need to know what they're planning," Ghost smirked. "Already on it." The ambush. Ice and her crew planned a strike on one of Kane's supply lines, hoping to disrupt his operations and force him into the open. The intel from the broker proved invaluable, allowing them to pinpoint the shipment's location and time. The ambush went smoothly at first. Ghost took out the guards with surgical precision, while Eli and Dre's replacement, Marcus, handled the ground team. Ice moved through the chaos with her usual precision, her icy demeanor unshaken. But as they secured the shipment, a familiar voice rang out. "Nice move, Ice." Ice turned to see Red standing atop a nearby shipping container, her fiery hair illuminated by the floodlights. Behind her stood Kane, his smirk as wide as the chaos unfolding around them. "You didn't think I'd let you have all the fun, did you?" Red said, her tone mocking. Ice's ice blue eyes narrowed. "This is your play? Teaming up with him?" Red shrugged. "For now. But don't worry, I'm not here to fight." "Not yet." Kane stepped forward. "Enjoy your win, Queenpin. It's the last one you'll get." As Red and Kane retreated, Ice's crew regrouped, their victory feeling hollow in the face of this new alliance. Back at the loft, Ice stood by the window, staring out at the city she had fought so hard to control. Eli approached her, his voice soft. "What's the plan?" Ice didn't turn. "We dig deeper. Find their weak spots, and when the time comes, we take them both out." Her phone buzzed with a new message. She glanced at the screen, her jaw tightening. The message was from the broker. "Red's working both sides. Watch your back." The war for North Park was far from over, and Ice was ready to face whatever came next.